Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On the Couch with My Food Religion. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Will Cole, live from the US. And we're going to be talking today a bit about his new book due to be released next week, The Inflammation Spectrum. We will also touch on his other book, Keto Terian, and lots of other things along the way. Will, thank you so much for joining me. The first thing I always ask my guests is, what is something that you are digging right now? So it could be a food, it could be a practice, it could be an item of clothing, it could be, I don't know, one of your kids' books. What is something you are digging right now?
I think being in full inflammation spectrum mode right now, I'm digging not only the food ways, but the non-food ways that the research is showing we can calm inflammation, because I see so often as a functional medicine practitioner how inflammation impacts our body. So to see the impact that mindfulness, meditation, and different lifestyle practices to help to modulate inflammation, that's what I'm digging right now.
Awesome. How important do you think sleep is in that? Yeah.
Yes, so important. I was going to mention sleep on part of that non-food factor, but I thought it was too boring. But I think it's so not boring, really. I hope people realize that it's so paramount to someone's wellness. It's not a luxury that you're going to do when you're dead. It's something that should be a call to action in the here and now, because research shows that just one night of poor sleep has been linked to increased C-reactive protein, which is a biomarker that we run in functional medicine and conventional medicine to gauge for inflammation. Just one night, let alone we know that the people that have sleep problems, it's more than one night, and the impact that has on inflammation. So sleep hygiene, as we call it, or just proper sleep habits, things that promote and support healthy restorative sleep, not just the quality, but also the quantity. Both are so superbly important.
Yeah, absolutely. I about 6 months ago went and bought an Aura ring because I'm just full nerding out on the sleep at the moment, and I cannot get enough of the information around that and how powerful it is. I've always been a massive sleep geek. Like, I have always prioritized sleep. But I don't really think I ever knew quite how important it is. And so much about, cancer risk and heart disease and diabetes and all those sorts of things, and even just our body's ability to process sugar and produce insulin when we don't have enough sleep. It's so interesting. Something that I do find really traumatic for a lot of new mums particularly is you're in the trenches and sleep deprivation is part of that newborn baby life.
Mm-hmm.
Got any hot tips on how to help manage that? Because I think a lot of the time, especially when I start talking about sleep with people who are new mums, they just freak out. They're like, oh man, I'm going to die. I'm probably just going to die because I'm not sleeping. What can they do?
Yeah, I've been there. I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old, and obviously, I think my wife went through it worse than I did. Obviously, when it comes to nursing and all the requirements that requires over time, but it's tough, and I see the impact that it had on us during that time, and obviously, I see as a functional medicine practitioner the impact that can have. So, the bigger kind of reality is that this is a season of your life, and you really can't change to a large degree. I mean, you can do different methods of sleep training and making sure that your baby's properly rested so you have the best sleep that's possible. But even the best sleep that's possible is going to be probably less than you need, at least for some period of time in your life. So do the best you can when the baby is napping. Do the best you can to nap when the baby's napping in those early days, and this is, not everybody has access to this. Not everybody has a support system that this is possible, but to have family members or friends, or if you have any other help, just to, for the time being at the beginning, to get some reprieve, to have some sleep time and rest time and self-care for you during that time, if that's possible. I know that's not always possible, but do the best you can in that way. And then when you can sleep, even those short periods of time, get as much restorative sleep as possible. And I get it. Even today, having older kids, you want to have that, adult time or me time whenever your baby or your child is sleeping. But sometimes we have to like put down the remote or put down the cell phone, as tempting as it can be, because you can finally do it, but to put your sleep first. And realize it's a season, and do the best you can, get the best sleep, restorative sleep you can during that time. So things like a gravity blanket or weighted blanket, things like essential oils, things like even CBD or chamomile tea or other things like that. That is good for anybody, but is even more important when sleep is few and far between.
And I think maybe in that period of time as well, control what you can control. So the amount of times your baby wakes up during the night is probably beyond your control. But what you're actually doing, like you said before, you were talking about the elements that were non-food related in terms of inflammation. In that period of time, you can actually control the food. So nourish your body as best you can. And the stuff you can't control, then just try not to stress too much about it.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the inner resistance towards the lack of sleep compounds the problem. Like you're not getting sleep. Like you can't control it all. So just don't really do the best you can to take care of yourself, like you said, with food, but also mindfulness practices, like really checking in with yourself on that level too, so you can have an inner non-resistance and an acceptance of what is during that time when your baby needs you, and it's not perfect for sleep, but it's perfect for your baby.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you please tell everybody a little bit about yourself? You are a functional medicine practitioner, chiropractor. How did you get into this space? Because I find often people who kind of end up in this space, particularly in that functional medicine or holistic health, it's often through a journey of their own. So, can you please tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are now and what is it that you do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a functional medicine practitioner. My doctorate is from Southern California University of Health Sciences here in the States and outside of Los Angeles. And my postdoctorate education and training is in functional medicine and clinical nutrition. So my day job is consulting patients online. We primarily have a virtual functional medicine practice. We have a lot of patients in Australia. So I'm used to the evening consults or the really early morning consults. And people are like waking up, and before their kids get on the bus, they are having their consult in the morning. So that's what I do. I give people a functional medicine perspective on their health. We deal a lot with hormonal issues, digestive issues, autoimmune issues, neurological issues like anxiety, depression, brain fog, fatigue. This is my heart and passion, to really give people the answers as to why they're struggling with these issues, from a functional medicine perspective, but also giving them obviously tools to do something about it and empowering them and giving them agency over their wellness. Because so many people are struggling with health issues. They're just illusioned as to what's even going on. And they're trying to be good stewards of their health or going to their doctor, but they're not really given much answers. They're just told, take this pill, see you in 6 months. And really, they're having very sparse labs, and they are a lot of times delegitimized, especially young moms. I mean, you talk about a class of people that are very much put to the side and said, well, the excuse is you're a new mom. But then when your kids get older and you still feel lousy, what's the reason then? And a lot of times pregnancy and childbirth will shift the immune system. A lot of people with autoimmune conditions can attest to this. Will shift your hormones, and your body is different. But yet it's this umbrella of, well, you just aren't getting enough sleep and you're just a new mom, which obviously is a part of it, but it's not. Women know their bodies and they're intuitive with this. And these are the people I talk to. These are the people that we dig past the mundane and the superficial, and we look at what are the root drivers of why someone's struggling with these issues. So I love this stuff, and I love giving people answers. It's this double-edged sword in the sense of, I'm going over serious health issues, I'm going over health problems, but honestly, the other side of it is it's bittersweet in the sense of, the last thing someone wants me to say is everything's fine on these labs, even though they don't feel fine. So it's actually quite a positive, because people can feel a sigh of relief and know, hey, like, whoa, I'm not just crazy. I'm not just depressed, as they're told by their doctor, or they're just not, not just getting older. They can actually get real, measurable, objective data from multiple labs' perspective. What's going on here when we look past just the basic stuff? So that's what I do. And my training is in this. I've been doing this for a long time. We started a virtual functional medicine practice like 11 years ago. I've been doing the online consulting thing this whole time. But now it's more common, telehealth, telemedicine. It's quite grown, but we definitely love it. So it's I couldn't ask for a better job for sure.
So have you always wanted to be into that holistic health realm, or was there a period of time where you actually wanted to be a medical doctor?
I never wanted to be a conventional medical doctor. I grew up in a home that was interested in health. And my dad, growing up, he was a bodybuilder in the 80s and 90s and in the United States. I thought it was normal for everyone's dad to be like completely ripped and like greased in baby oil and like turquoise Speedos, but it wasn't normal, I found out. And my mom was
grilled chicken and steamed broccoli.
yeah, my mom would film him to like get the right poses, and he'd critique it, like all the techniques that the bodybuilding world does. That they were interested in health for that reason and other reasons too. They were just interested in that. So in the 80s and 90s, when it was not like the wellness world that it is today, I was eating this strange organic sprouted food and the adaptogenic tonics growing up. So that informed me as a child about food and the difference between what I was eating at home and what my friends were eating, or what I was fed at school, or what not I wasn't fed at school, but what was fed to us as students at school. And that growing awareness then became formal training, where I went to SUHS, which is an integrative medicine school in Los Angeles. So yeah, that's where it came about. And I knew, like, if you look at the statistics, and I actually wrote about this in the inflammation spectrum, the statistics around conventional medical training, they get little to none as far as nutrition training and food training. And the research shows that most general practitioners would fail a basic nutrition test. So that's not what I wanted. I think there's great tools and toolboxes that conventional doctors, some people are alive because of medication. We need general practitioners. We need specialists. All that's fantastic. But it's a different tool and a different toolbox. And I was interested in health and wellness, but being evidence-based. And I think functional medicine, without a doubt, is the marrying the best of conventional medicine, which is being evidence-based and running labs, and the best of alternative health, which is getting to the root cause and finding out why somebody's going through what they're going through. And that's not just my opinion. I mean, the Cleveland Clinics, who is one of the gold standards in the United States as far as medicine is concerned, they have a functional medicine center. A lot of medical institutions that are conventional institutions have functional medicine centers now. So why is that? It's because they look at the numbers, they look at the statistics, and they see the need for people that are good patients. They're compliant patients, but they're still struggling. So they're looking for these other options that are effective, that don't have all the negative potential side effects that some of these more costly options that people have in conventional medicine.
And it's nice, I think, to see people wanting to address the root cause as opposed to just band-aid a symptom. Interesting that you said that medical doctors only get a really small amount of nutrition teaching, which I think is so fascinating, because most people will take what their GP says as absolute gospel around food. And I don't know about you guys, but for Australia for the last 20 years, the recommendation has been eat lots of healthy whole grains and eat all of the low fat everything, even though it's a chemical shitstorm. And we wonder why we're fatter and sicker than we have been ever. Mm-hmm. I actually just had a girlfriend recently be diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and her gastroenterologist told her that what she eats makes no difference. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, it's one big tube. Like from here all the way, that is one tube. How is it possible that what goes in here does not affect everything else? That is not possible. Yet that's the recommendation, and that's the recommendation that's being given to people all over the place for all sorts of things. What you eat doesn't matter, and how it possibly cannot matter is just beyond me. So I think it's amazing that we've got more people helping people to understand that what you put in your body is one of the most important things, full stop.
Oh my goodness, yes. It's so true. I mean, talk to anybody with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or any autoimmune condition. There is so much power that they wield in overwhelmingly most of the cases that they improve their health. And again, that's not to negate the place for medications. I think that there are some people that need to be on medications and there's a place for that. But there is that it's not either or. It's not us versus them. I mean, another word for functional medicine is integrative medicine. So let's look at the most effective options, and medication may be a part of that puzzle, but there are other pieces to that puzzle. And you're absolutely right. They think food just has to influence weight. And that's going to be further from the truth. The foods we eat are constantly and dynamically instructing our immune system, instructing our microbiome, instructing inflammatory cascades. And to say anything else is not looking at the research and is honestly not paying attention to our patients, because they'll tell you otherwise.
Absolutely. So that's probably a really good segue into your new book, The Inflammation Spectrum. Can you please tell me a bit about the book and how it even came about?
So the inflammation spectrum, it's my second book. Like I said, my day job is consulting patients online. So it really was born out of me consulting patients and seeing so many different types of inflammation and the impact that's having on someone's health. So maybe the layperson may think inflammation, they'll think of like arthritis or sore muscles and joints. And that's the extent of their understanding of inflammation in the body. But in reality, inflammation is linked to just about every health problem out there, from diabetes to heart disease to cancer to autoimmune conditions to digestive problems to hormonal imbalances to even mental health issues like anxiety and depression and fatigue and brain fog. These all the scientific literature suggests have inflammatory components, if not being full-blown chronic degenerative inflammatory problems. So this is what I just mentioned. These are very, very common issues. This is the majority of the human race, sadly. What is the underlying commonality? It's inflammation. So in functional medicine, we ask, okay, let's measure inflammation. Let's see what's going on downstream. And because the body is so brilliantly interconnected, inflammation in one area can beget inflammation in other areas. But what also is upstream to that inflammation? What's driving that? So food is a part of that. Toxins are part of that. Chronic infections are part of that. All the nutrient deficiencies. There's a lot of different components to consider that you can measure on labs and you can get from a comprehensive health history to look at both sides of the coin, both what's driving the inflammation and looking at the inflammation itself as a problem, because we're made up of cells, and inflammation, chronic inflammation, would create this oxidation or this causing a rigidity of the cell membranes, which will trigger genetic predispositions, these epigenetic factors impacting genetics. So that is what I do for patients. I look and measure these things and give them tools to overcome these things. So that's where inflammation spectrum came. Educating people about the inflammation spectrum, from low-grade fatigue, background anxiety, low-grade digestive problems, to the other end of the inflammation spectrum, where it's full-blown autoimmune conditions and hormonal problems and everything in between on that continuum. And it's a concept that I talked about in my first book, in Keto Terian. I talked about how beta-hydroxybutyrate, the ketone, helps to downregulate inflammation and the research and science about that. But I wanted to have a deep dive in inflammation and this concept of the inflammation spectrum in my second book. So it enabled me a whole book's worth of digging into the exciting science and research about this beyond beta-hydroxybutyrate, beyond the ketogenic diet, which is certainly exciting. But let's look at other ways to calm inflammation levels. Let's look at the non-food things that help to calm inflammation, so people can have a full arsenal of tools in their toolbox to help to improve their health.
So what can people expect to find in that book?
So the book starts out with really informing people about the statistics out there. So it's quite a sobering beginning, but it's also showing the beautiful intricacy that make you and me and all of us are different. So it's sobering, but it's this duality of, look, like we have so much power over our health, and it's really empowering, I think, for people to realize that. Then it digs into the inflammation spectrum quiz, where it kind of allows the person find out where they're at on the inflammation spectrum, which is adapted from questions that I ask patients online. So then they can kind of take this sort of functional medicine journey to say, okay, maybe neurologically, like my brain score was higher, or my hormone score was higher, or my digestive score was higher, or my autoimmune score was higher. And they can see through the quiz where inflammation may be problematic for them. And then based on their quiz score, they can, what I wanted it to be is a functional medicine journey for themselves, so they can be their own health advocate, to start making positive action steps that's based for them, and really bringing in this concept of bio-individuality into this journey. And that's the heart of functional medicine. We're all different. What works for one person may not be right for you. And that's really what the book is, what I designed it to do, is to allow the person to go through this journey. So they have a toolbox that they can bring into their life based on the quiz score, with different foods to focus on, different natural medicine and lifestyle changes based on their quiz score, and then a different food plan to help to find out what their body loves and what their body hates. Because you and I both know, I mean, there's so much food confusion and disillusionment as to what the heck they should be doing. So I wanted to create Food Peace for the reader, to find a clarity and discernment and freedom that they can have to know, okay, this is not a diet anymore. This is not a food plan. This is not a book. This is, I know I feel fantastic when I eat these foods. And when I avoid those foods, I feel fantastic too. And when I eat them, I don't feel as good. And that's that aha moment that people have, where they've then had a paradigm shift from dieting to just loving your body enough to feed it good things. And that's that the shackles of dieting, dogma, and shame are removed, and people can have food peace. And that's really the end of the book, is getting to that point.
Yeah, and I think it's about creating a lifestyle, isn't it? It's about creating something that isn't a diet anymore. It's not a, I can't have these foods, I can have these foods. It's, these foods make me feel good. These foods make me feel shit. So I'm not going to eat the things that make me feel shit. I'm going to eat the things that make me feel good. And that's just how I eat. And that doesn't mean you don't have the ability to go out for dinner with friends and enjoy, you know, whatever's on the menu within reason. And have a glass of wine, move on with life, and tomorrow go back and eat the most nutrient dense things you can. It's about creating that awareness around your body, isn't it? Because I think the problem is we have become so used to feeling crappy. We've become so used to feeling inflamed and bloated and constipated and having shitty sleep and having these, you know, blood sugar peaks and troughs and having brain fog and all of these things that people just now accept as normal. That is their normal, because they don't know any different. And it's not until you clear out the shitty food and remove those things that are causing inflammation, and whether that be, you know, high stress that you're not managing, whether that be toxic cleaning products, whatever it is, I don't think until you take that stuff out and you actually let your body get back to what it actually is normal, people don't realize what it's like to feel good. And once you do, it is so easy to say no to those things that don't make you feel good, because you realize what it's like to feel great. So I think it's really great to give people those tools. So if somebody reads the books, they do the quizzes, they work through that, what makes me feel good, what makes me not feel good. They get to the end of that though, and they still feel like they're not quite there. What is your recommendation for those people? What do they do next?
Yeah, so they could go a little bit longer during the food plan, and we have these like checkpoints in the book where they may just need more time, and that's certainly a consideration as they read the book. That's an option for people. And then other options that I recommend in the book are running some labs. So it's definitely we start off with the reader that like maybe doesn't want a functional medicine doctor, or thinks they don't need them, or maybe doesn't need them. But there is we're asking questions throughout the book of saying, okay, look, you may feel a lot better than you used to feel, but maybe you're not 100%. Maybe there are some missing pieces from your puzzle. And I think that's when a good functional medicine doctor comes into play, of seeing the missing pieces. And honestly, that's most of my patients. They are very well-read people. They're erudite. They know more than most doctors do about health and wellness, but they are still struggling despite doing all the things in wellness. And we're used to these complicated, beyond the basic cases, and that's appropriate at that point. Let's see what labs are appropriate. Let's get some objective data. So running the labs that we talk about in the book, of looking at the things like the gut issues, the hormonal problems, the methylation impairments, these food reactions, all of the different combinations of variables that are instructing inflammatory cascades for some people. So we talk about that. We talk about the different compounds that may be problematic for some people, like oxalates, histamines. We talk about different reactions like that some people have to lean into. Why is it? It's really the pervasiveness of intestinal problems, gut problems. And we're seeing epidemic rises of that, sadly. And sometimes people have to kind of really hone in on these missing pieces because a lot of these compounds are in food, like healthy foods.
Yeah.
But because of their wrecked guts, their body's not even handling healthy foods. So we're even pinpointing these very nuanced things like FODMAPs and histamines and oxalates and salicylates and all of these sort of nuancy stuff. But we don't start there. We start off with, we back up a bit because not everybody has to be that myopic about it. So we definitely have to go there for some people. And I wanted to give people the research around it for people who do have to go there.
Yeah. So for people who are, having to go low FODMAP, have oxalate intolerances, salicylate intolerances, all that sort of stuff, that's a fairly extreme picture. And like you said, a lot of those foods encompass really healthful foods that contain lots of salicylates and oxalates and all of those sorts of things. In your experience, because it can be very, very difficult for people to get their head around low FODMAP or removing salicylates, all that sort of jazz. In your opinion, is that something that is a short-term removal of things that are causing inflammation to heal and seal that gut lining, work on repairing that intestinal permeability, and then reintroduce those things? It's not a long-term diagnosis of that's it for you for, all leafy greens for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, I agree. The normal answer or the normal trajectory for people, a normal experience for people is for a temporary removal to help to calm down the inflammatory cascades, to create, like you said, improve intestinal permeability, integrity, and to sort of get the person to the place where they can handle those foods. And then we have to look at preparation of foods too. I mean, because sometimes it's the food can be higher in one of these compounds, but by preparing it in a certain way, you can make it more bioavailable and digestible and easier to assimilate. And we talk about that too in the book. But there are some genetic SNPs that are associated with things like mast cell activation and histamine intolerance. And those are things to consider, that some people won't ever be able to have lots of a certain food. Or some people, like with SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO is quite difficult to overcome. While we do that, it takes time. So this may be months or even years down the line, but the goal is to slowly build up variability. Like the analogy that I use for patients is if someone, like God forbid, if they broke like an arm, they have to keep the cast on for a time to help build and mend and strong. What we're doing with these food protocols are that proverbial cast, and we have to be consistent, have that cast on for a number of months or a period of time to create stability and strength and fortitude to be able to handle a certain amount of stress. But at a certain point, my goal as a functional medicine practitioner is to take that cast off so you can have as much flexibility when it comes to food, and it can handle a little bit of stress, right? It's not as you can have that random food that isn't the best for you, but you're not paying for it afterwards, and you have that sort of resilience that I want people to get. And we all have that different level of resilience through our healing, depending on how long someone's been sick or the severity of their case. A lot of different variables to consider, but definitely, without a doubt, these food tweaks or adjustments are not meant to be forever.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people need to realize too, particularly when they're coming into that functional medicine space, we're so used to going to a GP and getting a pill. Everybody wants a quick fix. And I think when people move into this functional medicine space, what they need to realize is we're dealing with root cause. And that root cause is something that has been created over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of somebody's life. You cannot expect to fix that in a week. You didn't create it in a week. It's not going to get fixed in a week. So I think people really need to realize that a healing journey is that it is a journey, and it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. So I think that's a really important thing for people to realize when they come into that functional medicine space. You're not going to get a pill to fix this in a week. It's something that you've really got to invest in healing your body, because it's been a period of time of destruction, and it's going to take, potentially not quite that long, but maybe that long to fix it back up again.
Certainly. Yeah. I was going to say that there's some research in the book where I talk about the trajectory of gut lining permeability improvements. And there's studies to suggest it could take 18 to 24 months for adults to consistently work on this. And that, again, that's not to say you're waiting a year and a half to 2 years to feel anything, but it's that incremental moving of decreasing the severity and the frequency of these symptoms that we're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So your first book was called Keto Terian. Keto is so the new black right now. Everybody is doing keto or being keto or eating the keto foods. And I've been running a lot of workshops doing low carb and keto cooking workshops, because I just found that there are so many people who want to do keto because it's the new black, but it's a lot of bacon fried in butter with a side of cheese. And whilst that might be hashtag keto, it's also, hashtag nutrient deficient, and that's not health. That's not going to create excellent health outcomes for anybody by eating something that like that. And not that bacon, butter, or cheese are bad things, but that cannot be the bulk of somebody's diet and expect an outcome of health at the end. So I would love you to talk a little bit about your book, Keto Terian, because I haven't read it, but I have listened to a few interviews with you talking about that. And I really, really just resonated with the holistic approach that you take to the ketogenic diet. So can you please tell people a little bit about the book and again, what prompted you to write that book?
Yeah. So I wrote, Keto Terian only came out just last year. So it definitely, I'm having a book a year at this point. I don't know how I'm doing it, but Keto Terian was... I have to be on top of it for sure. Keto Terian was born out of my own personal health experience. This is the way that I eat. This is the way I've eaten for a long time. This isn't like new to me. But it's really cool to get it out there, because it is having it's in its zeitgeist at this point, the ketogenic diet. But it's cool. But even when the zeitgeist is gone and fads are faded, the science will remain, the health benefits will remain, and what I see in my life, in my patients' life that are on the ketogenic diet, and not all are. Not everybody needs to be in ketosis. Not everybody wants to be in ketosis. And that's part of my job as a functional medicine practitioner, to find out what your body loves, what your body doesn't, and what you prefer too, making it realistic and fun and grace-filled. But back to Keto Terian, what it was I had co-hosted, and I still do, we're on a little bit of a break right now, but I co-host a podcast called Keto Talk. I see patients, I write a lot about health, and saw sort of the misinformation, or I would say the potential pitfalls of the conventional ketogenic diet, where, as you said, it is bacon and butter and just with a side of cheese. And I think that let's do it in a way that makes sense. Let's go ketogenic the clean way. So Keto Terian is clean keto. And I wanted to offer an alternative to as well, because there's a lot of people that just prefer being more plant-based or feel good there, but they want to take it to the next level. So I wrote Keto Terian for both sides, really, for the ketogenic community, to give them more plant-based options, bring them to the middle. Don't become fearful about vegetables. That's really should not be on your fear list. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's the plant-based world, which there are carbitarians and just eating tons of things that turn into sugar all day long. So I wanted to offer both sides and bring them to the middle, and offer the disillusioned person as to how do I go keto, and teach them how to do that. So there are vegan keto options, vegetarian keto options, and pescatarian keto options. So mostly plant-based is on the cover of Keto Terian for a reason. While it's predominantly plant-based with lots of vegan keto options, actually the majority of the recipes are vegan keto. There's the vegetarian keto options, which we bring in eggs and ghee, and then the pescatarian keto options has wild-caught fish, fresh seafood, but still being predominantly plant-centric. So it's leveraging the benefits of ketosis. It's tapping into the benefits of ketosis, but it's doing it in a clean way, a sustainable way. It's a lifestyle way. It's not a fad diet way. This is my main goal as a functional medicine perspective. So it allows you to become a fat burner, to boost your brain function, to improve brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, like increasing neurogenesis, improving neuroplasticity, down-regulating inflammation, and actually talk about the concept of the inflammation spectrum in Keto Terian first, of how the beta-hydroxybutyrate ketone down-regulates things like NF-kappa B and the COX-2 and the NLRP3 inflammasome, basically these pro-inflammatory cascades and pathways and cytokines. It calms them down by being in ketosis and upregulates the pro-antioxidant, the longevity benefits, things like the NRF2 pathway and the AMPK pathway. Very important to do because most people are only stuck in sugar burning mode. They're only burning kindling all day long. And it's like kindling on a fire. You have to keep putting kindling on to maintain the flame. They're hangry and they're irritable if they miss a meal. They have, like you said earlier, this blood sugar roller coaster, and because they're sugar burners. And I wanted to give people the gift of metabolic flexibility by putting a log on the fire, which is burning fat for fuel. It's slower burning. It'll maintain the blaze throughout the day. That's sustained energy, sustained fuel for the day, and burning fat for fuel. So that's what I wanted people to do. But let's also get the benefits of being plant-based and, with the phytonutrients and fiber for your gut microbiome and antioxidants and polyphenols, all these good things that plants offer us. So that's really what it is. It's the amalgamation of being the best of being plant-based and the best of being keto.
That's really interesting because I think a lot of the time people think that those two cannot go hand in hand. And it's awesome to see that you can. But I also think a lot of people go to keto and they get scared of eating plants. They get scared of eating vegetables. And I think it's so important for people to realize that it's not about always having to be in ketosis, is it? It's about creating metabolic flexibility so that your body can burn fat for fuel as opposed to the kindling. You want to be able to burn that log for fuel. And I think making sure that we can incorporate as many nutrient-dense whole foods as possible. So, keto for you might look different to keto for me because of our metabolic flexibility. But hopefully it's a place where people can get to create metabolic flexibility so they can incorporate lots of different colorful vegetables and some fruits and all that sort of stuff in their diet and get all those amazing phytonutrients and minerals and all that sort of stuff that you're not going to get from bacon, butter, and cheese day in and day out.
Certainly.
So can I, you touched on, and I love that you have this very, plant-based approach to keto because I think everybody needs to eat more vegetables. What are your thoughts on the carnivore diet?
You'd think as the author of Keto Terian, a mostly plant-based ketogenic diet, I would abhor the carnivore diet. I actually don't abhor it. I think it's all about context. It's how do you use it? Like you said, removing histamines and oxalates, salicylates, and things like that. That's for a time, and I see the same thing really with the carnivore diet. It's an ultimate form of the elimination diet for a time being. As long as they're doing it in a clean way, meaning it's nutrient dense with more organ meats, which everybody loves liver, right? No, that's not true. But people should be focusing on that. And they need to look at not having dairy during that time. They need to look at even albumin in egg whites can be problematic for the people that should be doing the carnivore diet. So even just egg yolks or removing eggs entirely for a time to really just, and I would say bring more fish in and be more fish-centric and pescatarian carnivore in a way. I think those are some considerations. Nutrient-dense, low reactivity, even amongst the carnivore foods, should be of consideration for people that need it. And focusing on soft cooked meats as well, like broths and soups and stews. They're not going to have all the vegetables in the soups and stews, but it is still gentle for digestion during this time for the people that's even relevant for. Not everybody has to be doing this. It's definitely like Keto Terian is a lifestyle. Keto Terian is for the general person that wants to improve their health and amplify their wellness, right? The inflammation spectrum is to finding out what food triggers you have and to lower inflammation. The carnivore diet is a specific group of people that are really sensitive, that are overreactive to just about everything and need that intervention for this period of time. So it's not like the average Joe needs to be doing the carnivore diet for a long time. But people can lean into it if it's clinically appropriate, if it's just practically appropriate, and slowly reintroduce foods. It's not meant to be forever and ever, because the long-term implications of the gut microbiome and food disordered eating, and there's so many other potentials. If someone has the ApoE4 or the 3,4, these genetic variants, too much saturated fat's not appropriate for them, depending on how much saturated fat they're getting in a carnivore diet. And people with intestinal permeability issues, it could be a problem. So look, it's definitely has some good things. I use it clinically when it's appropriate, for a time being, to calm things down. So it's about context. And I think broad sweeping statements, when you get the tribalism that's going on in the carnivore diet community, that's the problem, is that they're so dogmatic, and this food tribalism is really not good. It's really stressing out the common person that's reading all the articles, and they're disillusioned to what's going on. And I would say the same with the ketogenic zealots as well. They they shame you if you go out of ketosis or even talk about a sweet potato. It's really messed up. But I just don't think it's helpful for people. It's helpful for like the super biohacker, like small percentage of people that to thrive on that nuancy stuff, but not everybody's a biohacker. And we kind of have to make this as practical and realistic and sustainable for the common person as possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was the same when, paleo came out. The Paleo Police would, lose their mind if someone ate a white potato. For fuck's sake, it's not heroin, is it? Like, it's a white potato.
Yeah, or white rice. I mean, Lord, throw people in prison.
Don't you dare eat white rice. The hell is wrong with you? It's so interesting, isn't it? It's so polarizing. But I think some people, it's very interesting. There's definitely a type of person who is drawn to a very, very strict, regimented diet. And it's the people who have always done diets. They like a diet. They like very strict guidelines. And they feel very triggered by anybody who goes out of their guidelines. Mm-hmm. Which is very, very interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about, judgment of other people, and how people get very judgy about things, especially if they're a paleo zealot or a keto zealot or a carnivore zealot. And so often it's, judgment is a mirror, not a window. It's all about them, and it's nothing about you. So you just hand that right on back.
Yeah. Totally. Twitter is like their voice box sometimes, social media. Could you imagine if Donald Trump was like into dieting? He would be hearing about it too. He'd be one of those food shamers.
I would rather not hear anything from Donald Trump ever again, to be honest. So I would love it if you could touch for me, please, on intermittent fasting and how you feel like that can be incorporated, because I think for a lot of people, sometimes something like a keto approach can seem a little bit too extreme or a little bit too difficult or too hard. And I feel like something like intermittent fasting, if done cleanly with whole foods and, food quality is really focused on, I think there's a lot of benefits you can get that you would get from ketosis by intermittent fasting that might just be a step in for people before they get to that next level if they, are trying to ease into something. So could you talk a little bit about intermittent fasting?
Sure. So I talk about intermittent fasting actually in both books, both in Keto Terian and the inflammation spectrum, because for two different reasons. One, in Keto Terian, it enhances ketosis. And the more someone is fat adapted, it's going to they're naturally just going to randomly fast, not because they're willing and gritting their teeth to fast. It's they eat when they're hungry, and when they have a log on the fire and they're keto adapted and they have the metabolic flexibility, they'll just randomly eat when they're hungry, and it normally has some time restricted feeding window to it. And then in the inflammation spectrum, we talk about it because it downregulates inflammation. So it is a tool to use for sure. The question is what type is right for you? I mean, more isn't always better. And I think you used a term that's appropriate. It's leaning into it. It's some people bring in their disordered eating and their bad relationships with food in their body. And then at that point, it's really an eating disorder disguised as a wellness practice. That's not good. Like that, you'd almost better not to do it at all. Just focus on food, eat nutrient dense food, fill yourself up, like get used to that. Like just feeling good with good food, and then maybe lean into the time restricted feeding and intermittent fasting later on. And I even advocate that for the ketogenic diet for many people. So get the food quality down appropriately first. And then like it's the taking it easy option in Keto Terian. I talk about that because you shouldn't go too fast too soon. Otherwise, you are really setting yourself up for another yo-yo diet that's really not good for you. And you really want to set yourself up for success in your wellness in your life. But once you come into this state of like a good healthy relationship with your body, good relationship with food, I agree. I think time restricted feeding and intermittent fasting can be amazing, and really lean into it from a healthy place. And it's just about balance, and you're coming to this space of fasting and time restricted feeding as from balance. And if you can hold that positive light there, then there's nothing wrong with it. Actually, it's really beneficial because there's a time to eat and there's a time to fast, and that's okay. And sometimes deeper fasts are really therapeutic and make people feel amazing, but then they can go back into refeeding and nourishing their body with foods. There's balance in their life. So I do not agree with the intermittent fasting critics that say it's just disordered eating. Yes, it can be. Just like almost anything in life can create disorder when you're coming with a negative paradigm towards it. But the reality is you shouldn't then negate everything around it and say you should never do that. There's definitely, if you use the tool appropriately, it can be really amazing. And it's a tool that I work with patients on. It's a tool that I do almost every day to some degree. I typically would do a 12 to 6 eating window. I'll fast in the morning. I'm really not hungry in the morning, and that's just being fat adapted. And it's very sensible. It's not extreme. It's not dogmatic. It's not punitive on my body. I'm just having this sort of balance in my life. And I hope the same for other people.
And I think they're reading, which I think most people don't have that anymore. They just completely lack the ability to know when they're hungry because they eat every 3 hours. How do you know when you're hungry? You've never been hungry in your life if you're eating every 3 hours. So I think it's really important for people to even just try it. And it might just mean that instead of having your breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning, have it at 8:30 the next morning and see how that feels for you. And I think if you also, if people are kind of white knuckling their way to that next meal, it's not about just ketoing harder or fasting harder or paleoing harder. It's about having a look at what did you last eat, and was it enough food? Was there enough calories in there? Was there enough protein? Was there enough fiber? Was there enough good quality fat? Because if you're starving, again, either it's time to eat or your last meal maybe just wasn't the most nutrient dense thing. And I think so many people just lack the ability to see that food quality is so important. It's not just about I had 20 grams of fat and 5 grams of protein, and so tick, if it fits your macros, you're good. It's so important to make sure that we're eating good quality food as well.
So much. Yeah, it's so important. And I think out of this, all of this stuff that's coming out around nutrition and clinical nutrition and food science and all of this exciting this conversation that people are having in the health space, I think the more and more people are going to realize to be more in tune with their body and eat intuitively. But the conversation that I have in the inflammation spectrum is that it's really hard to eat intuitively when there's imbalance in the body. Like, is it intuition or is it hangriness? Is it intuition or hormone imbalance? I'm just trying to get people, like you said earlier, to get people to a place of center and ground them so they can have discernment and food peace to know what their body even needs. So many people are disillusioned to even know what their body needs because their hormones are off, their inflammation is up, and their microbiome is shifted, and that's confusing people.
absolutely. So what I would love to know, Will, and I'm sure everybody would love to know, is what does a day on your plate look like?
So a pretty basic guy, but basically I'm consulting patients during the day, obviously. So I like simplicity in the morning because we hit the ground running at the functional medicine clinic. And I'm standing at my standing desk doing webcam consultation. So I typically will fast in the morning. I do it 12 to 6, like I mentioned. I'll drink Earl Grey tea. Earl Grey tea is black tea with bergamot in it. And bergamot's been shown in the scientific literature to upregulate autophagy or cellular recycling. It's basically our body's anti-aging, anti-disease mechanism. So you could do it with Earl Grey. I also have like a cinnamon bergamot blend too. That's a fasting tea. It's a company called Peak Tea. They're friends of mine. But basically, they're just these tea sachets, and you pour them in water. But I like it because you don't have to wait till they steep. You just literally get the antioxidants right into the cup. And then I'll typically break the fast at noon. And I'll have something from, the recipes from Keto Terian and the inflammation spectrum are things that I eat. So I will have like a pesto zoodle bowl with avocado oil dressing and pesto like nut cheese. The zoodles are zucchini noodles with some like a Keto Terian smoothie with like avocado in it, some coconut milk in it, maybe some MCT oil, and some collagen powder, probably marine collagen, which is from wild caught fish. And then for dinner, I'll have typically a pescatarian keto option with maybe some wild caught fish, some sauteed like vegetables, even like some like roasted vegetables like Brussels sprouts, something sulfur rich to enhance methylation, which is our body's like healthy like detox pathways. And I'll have like a side. I like these avocado fries that are breaded with almond flour, and there's a chipotle aioli dressing in the book. So that's a typical day in the life. And I'll have, I don't know how many calories that is, but I just eat until I'm full. I eat when I'm hungry, and I'm eating until I'm satiated. Those are ketotarianisms. Those are just basic principles of eating. So I try to bring in those principles with my meals, and just to get my calories in and making sure I'm eating enough food between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m.
Yeah. And in terms of starchy carbs, do they have a place in your lifestyle?
Yeah, so I do a cyclical ketotarian approach. So 3 to 4 days, sometimes 5 days a week, I'll do a ketotarian, like high fat, low carb, plant centric approach. 4 to 5 days, I'll be doing the fasting, and then the remaining like 2 or 3 days, sometimes 4 days out of the week, I will moderate my carbs. So that's anywhere between 50 to 150 grams of carbs a day. By no means is it like a high, American or Australian carb diet. It is quite a sensible, moderate carb amount. And that looks like sweet potato fries. I love sweet potato fries. Involves like more fruit. It involves white rice, God forbid, but it involves white rice and things like that to moderate my carbs. And I can do that whenever I want to. And that's having grace and lightness with your food and not becoming orthorexic or having shame and stress and anxiety about healthy food, which is a real problem in our space. So it's really, that's what I want people to get to. Like, how do you use food to feel great? And that's what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so funny. White rice just became the devil, and we do a bit of white rice as well. I'll usually cook it in bone broth as well, just to increase some nutrients in there. And then I'll just do a whole big pot because it's easier just to do a whole big pot at once. And then I'll freeze it into portions. So then you've already got automatically cooked and cooled rice. So you've got some great resistant starch in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think super interesting. And I think a lot of the time, people will often find that they're doing keto or they're doing really low carb, and they're hitting a point where everything is just sticking. And if for them it's a fat loss thing, maybe the fat loss stalls. If it's not a fat loss thing, it might be just their hormones have just gone a bit haywire again, or their sleep's gone to shit, or all those sorts of things. And sometimes that can be a really interesting place to maybe look at carb cycling. And I think sometimes people just get so scared that if they're putting any carbs back in there, shit's going to go pear-shaped and they're going back to where they started. But I personally don't necessarily think that's the case. And I think sometimes it's so important for that leptin reset and for just
Mm-hmm.
kind of helping sleep, particularly for women, for hormone health, for sleep, having some starchy carbs in there, especially if you're quite an active person. And that can look really different. Some people, it could be 50 grams of carbs. Some people, it could be 150, 200 grams of carbs, which is still very low carb compared to the
Yeah.
Australian, diet. But for people who have found that they are doing keto or low carb and they've hit a plateau in whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, what would be your advice to them to have a look at what things?
Yeah. So one, I would say in ketosis, really looking, are they in ketosis or not? So a lot of times people think I'm in ketosis and I should be getting the benefits of ketosis. Like, why am I not seeing the benefits of ketosis? So to test, getting a blood meter, getting a breath meter. The gold standard is blood meter. Don't use urine long term because you're just seeing if your body's good at peeing out ketones, acetoacetate. You want to actually measure beta hydroxybutyrate or at least breath acetone, which is shown in some studies to be a good proxy for beta hydroxybutyrate. So either blood or breath meter. Are you in the zone or not? Are you not in the zone? That's A. And then look at food reactivities, and I think that's the conversation that I'm having in the inflammation spectrum. There may be things like dairy that is very common in the ketogenic diet that you may be having this low-grade inflammatory response because you have a dairy sensitivity. So maybe you should clean up your ketogenic diet. That's something to consider about and just go more Keto Terian. And then third, I would say to wake up the metabolism. Like you said, that leptin modulation is definitely something to consider, or thyroid hormone modulation. I think that sometimes people's leptins are just too low. The leptin hormone, which is a hormone that your fat cells produce, some people that are stuck at plateaus, they need that sort of modulation of leptin, because I almost find that some people they're in ketosis forever and ever, while some people need to do that maybe for like management of inflammation or neurological symptoms or severe insulin resistance. They are just as metabolically inflexible as the sugar burner because they're stuck in their mode entirely. And just like the sugar burners entirely, they've kind of caused this problem that they didn't intend to, but I feel like they need to wake up their metabolism and create some diversity and flexibility throughout their body, from a gut microbiome, hormone, inflammation, all that stuff. So I think a cyclical ketotarian or ketogenic approach would be an appropriate thing to do. So that's actually a chapter in Ketotarian, these different things. Other people do well with it seasonally, like doing it more from an ancestral health perspective, in ketosis more in the winter, in the summer. You guys are coming around summertime right now in Australia. You'd be having more fruits and things like that. And more, I'm coming into winter here on the other side of the planet, and I'd be going more into ketosis. That's more of an ancestral health perspective for a lot of populations, what we would have eaten for thousands and thousands of years. So that's another consideration that I write about too. And all of this is so relative, because we're not talking about carb loading like a bodybuilder. We are talking about literally just going right outside of ketosis, eating these healthy resistant starches for our gut microbiome, these polyphenols from fruits and vegetables and things like that. So this is the dance that people need to find. They need to find the rhythm of their body. They need to find the grace and lightness within wellness, because people are so, again, dogmatic and tribal about this stuff that they're losing the nuance and the gray areas of life and wellness, that they need to kind of find that for themselves.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, it's about creating metabolic flexibility, isn't it? And that flexibility means that you can have some fruit or you can have some sweet potato chips, and your body will go back into burning fat again for fuel as soon as it burns up that carbohydrate, and it's not going to derail everything. So it's about, and for people who are, pre-diabetic, completely overweight, have massive hormonal dysregulation, maybe, floating around with trying some starchy carbs and fruit in their first 2 weeks of getting into, this keto lifestyle, probably not the best idea. But for people who are, generally healthy and are following, like you do, this ketotarian approach where that's just your lifestyle, having flexibility around food and not creating social isolation,
Yeah.
I think is so important as well. So I would love to know, What do your kids eat? What sort of approach do you have for your family around food?
So I have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. It's interesting. We as parents, hopefully, we know how our kids receive information, and we know their little hearts and spirits, and we know how to speak age appropriately, but also based on their personality and how they receive things. And I think it's a really important approach. And this, everything I'm going to say about kids is applied to yourself as a listener too, is to make food, like bring a grace and lightness into food and not make this dieting obsession and food shame and all this junk that like really is not good. You should not pass that to your kid. You really need to make food fun, focus on all the good things they can have at home. Unless your kid has a credit card you don't know about, really what you're eating at home, it's up to you as a parent. And of course, like divorced parents, like where the kids are in different homes, that's difficult if you're not on the same page. Try the best you can to be on the same page as your co-parent. But if you're all in the same home, even easier, because you can just decide what you're eating as a family and have a conversation, make it age appropriate. There's a lot of really good cookbooks for kids that make it age appropriate and educate them about food and wellness and make it fun, get them in the kitchen, get them involved. And it's interesting that when you do that, it doesn't mean you'll have perfect healthy kids, like perfectly healthy eater kids, but it will mean that they'll start making more conscious decisions, and you'll be planting a seed to start making positive choices in their life. So my kids, or who they love their healthy treats with sugar and stuff in it too, more than I would want them to eat. But they know how to navigate life and food in their own way, age appropriately, where they can go to a restaurant and say, hey, is this gluten-free? Because my son doesn't feel good when he has gluten. Or my daughter will say, can I have this with this? Or can I not have that? Can I have, maybe she doesn't do well with corn. Can I have this potato chips instead of the corn chips, or whatever it is, or it's not the best thing under the sun, but they are in tune with their body and they're doing better options, which is a great thing. But there's balance, there's grace, there's not this obsession about food in their life. I think that's the best thing you can do. Because my son is more picky than my daughter. He supplements. He's 13 years old, so he has his supplements that he's having. And I say, well, if you have more of these foods, you wouldn't have to take these supplements. But he takes some supplements because he's not as diverse with his diet, which, again, food, you cannot supplement your way out of a poor diet. So he has to focus on his food. But the supplements are kind of filling in the blanks where he's not maybe getting it from food enough. And yeah, that's basically what I do as a parent. And I do the best I can with obviously, all of us need to do the best we can with the access we have and the information we have.
Yeah, you know, it's easy to get so strung. My kid's going to eat 7 different serves of vegetables at dinner, and they're not going to eat any of it. And you know what? If they eat 2 of the types of veggies that are on their plate, it's better than none, isn't it? Like, just continue to put good food in front of them. And I think I am a very strong believer that, you know, we are the parents. You are the adult in the house. And if the option is they don't eat their dinner and they still get ice cream or chocolate or whatever it is after dinner, why would they eat their dinner? So remove the shit, and dinner is dinner, and there's no other option. So this is what we're eating. Eat it or don't. Kids aren't in the habit of starving themselves. And, you know, let them make the choices that they feel good with at the time. I think it's, and like you said, just like G has been in the kitchen cooking with me since she was about 2.5. And she loves it. She loves to sit up on the bench, and she loves to eat raw veggies as they're getting chopped up. And she's very intuitive. They're very, very intuitive kids. They know what makes them feel good. And we eat really well at home. But when she goes to a kids' party, I'm not going to say, no, you can't have any cupcakes. I bought you some kale chips. I'm just going to say, fill your boots, kid. You have the resilience to be able to just do whatever you want to. And you know what? Usually she'll go and get a cupcake and she'll have a bite and she'll bring it back over to me and go, I don't want this. I'm like, okay, no worries. Yeah. And, you know, she might go and dig into the popcorn. She tends to head way more for the savory stuff. She's more like, she wants the cheese and the crackers and the popcorn rather than the sweet stuff. But, you know, she'll still have treats at a kid's party, but she'll usually come home and go, I've got a bit of a pain in the tummy, Mum. I'm like, oh yeah, well, sometimes when we eat too much party food, we get a bit of a pain in the tummy, but there's no bad food or good food.
Mm-hmm.
There's just food, and it makes you feel how it makes you feel. So let's acknowledge that, and let's sit down and have some extra veggies with our dinner.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a sensible approach, and it really is undoing a lot of the, especially amongst little girls, the sort of really food shame and dieting culture that we live in. I think it's good that, parents are growing an awareness on this new relationship with food in their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will not keep you any longer, Will. Thank you so much for all of your time, and thank you so much for all your information. Now, the inflammation spectrum is available next week. I've had heaps of people ask when they can get that book that I've been talking about. So when can they get the book that I've been talking about?
Yeah, October 15th comes out, and it's on pre-order now, depending on, when people listen to this. Yeah, so they can actually take the quiz that we talked about. It's on the website, the Inflammation Spectrum Quiz. It's all at drwillcole.com.
Perfect. And if people want to work with you on your website, is that how they will find you?
Yeah, they can go to drwillcole.com. We offer a free webcam health evaluation so people can see if a consult with me is right for them or not. And we offer an online group class once a month too, in addition to the one-on-one consults, just to make functional medicine more accessible and more affordable for people. We offer that once a month too for people that just want the group class approach, where we get the labs to them wherever they're at. So we have different options for people to make functional medicine work for them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will. I will make sure I link to all of those things below. And if everybody wants to head over, you can find Will at Dr. Will Cole on Instagram, or head over to his website and better find all his information there.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Will.